I don't like microphones. If you can't hear me, let me know. Thank you for being here. I wanted to come because this year is a very political year. It's an election year. And everything you've seen and heard here is all politics. None of it would have happened without electing people to office. And last Wednesday, the filing closed for all of the state, local, federal offices. So the candidates are out there and the campaigns are going to begin, and we'll have June primaries in November. And what those people do is they get elected to essentially toolboxes. There's a local government toolbox, which is, cities, counties, school districts. They have certain jurisdictions and authorities in law. There's state government and federal government. And here at the local level, they all overlap, they fight. The one thing I've learned is they don't talk to each other. So don't assume because somebody at the city council knows something that somebody at the state and federal level knows the same thing. It's always constant squeaky wheels. Squeaky wheels are saying in politics, squeaky wheels get the grease. It's your voice. And it's your vote. And if you want to sustain and gain a protection of this coastline, and I was just thinking, as Lisa was talking, that I created, when I was running for the Congress, I was leaving the Assembly, and Pete Wilson was the Republican governor, I'm a Democrat, and I proposed that we do a study on the coastline called California Ocean Resources Management Act. We nicknamed it CORMA. And my friend Jim Rote, who was an incredible doer as a scientist, lived here in Carmel, and I got him a job in the State Assembly Office of Research at the time when we were starting, the oil spills were happening, and he had a master's degree from Stanford through Hopkins, and he ended up being a guy who wanted to do public policy. He was a Marine Navy officer who became very anti-war, and when he got out of Vietnam and wanted to be a marine biologist. And I got him a job, and so he was able to translate for science purposes to the scientists why it was so important for them to be involved in politics, to know what's going on. I'm still amazed today when I teach classes at CSU and Big Upper Division science students. They don't know the difference between a city council and Congress, but the problem is they don't know why they need to know the difference. And I tell them, look, of all the professions in the world, the one that relies most on politics is science. Because the funding for research, for universities, for jobs, for NOAA employees is all politics. And you got to be involved in that kind of a politics. So I want to be here at Whalefest to have you be passionate advocates for awareness. It's an education process. In politics, they say, well, we elect leaders. Well, I found oftentimes I have brilliant ideas. I'm going to lead. And I turn around, there's nobody following. So you find that you can't lead unless there are followers. And followers won't be there unless they understand what's broken needs being fixed. And once they understand, they can talk about it. And that becomes the body politic that changes policy. Now, what I'm so excited about is that we need to recapture the absolutely global significance of right here, right there. Because right there, this wharf, is where California began. And when you think about it, I've been telling people in Congress, they say, what do you do in your district? People say, well, we manufacture cars, we represent IBM, I don't know, we do cows, oil, whatever it is, Broadway. I said, we sell scenery. When you think about it, it's that scenery that got the Spaniards to come ashore here. They sailed up the entire California coast, they could have pulled over anywhere. But they looked at this part and said, hey, there's trees, there's some mountains there, there's maybe some water. Came in, there was El Estero Lagoon there, the lake. And they said, hey, this is a cool place. We got all the supplies we need for our activity, our boats. And why did they come? They came because of politics. The politics was that the Russians were hunting sea otters and other mammals in their fur trade, and they were moving down. Spain didn't give a damn about this part of the earth. There's nothing here, no people that they could, all the attention was in Central and South America, where these huge civilizations had been there, built these great empires, between the Aztecs and Incas and so on. So all the activity was south of. But they saw that the Russians were coming down, and they thought that was pretty close. The British were out here, the French, and they decided, well, how do we, let's just start claiming some territory up there. How do we do that? Well, nobody wants to go up and live there. But we can hire the Franciscans to come on our boats. We'll provide them transportation, we'll provide them food, we'll provide them shelter, and we'll provide them defense with soldiers. And we'll land them in Monterey, and they can begin civilizing, as they thought, civilizing the native peoples. And with that, we'll build these communities, the civilizations that will be able to stop the Russians from advancing farther south. So I say, if it wasn't for sea otters, we probably all speak in Russian. So it's just exciting that all this happened here. And if you think how big it happened here, I was in Salinas yesterday dealing with some ag people. And the missions were just these huge ranches. They were the first big ranches because they had to grow food for the mission population. And these missions had thousands and thousands of cattle. And the Anglos who came here by ocean, and Larkin, I think you ought to read the book on Larkin. I don't think we would be a part of the United States if it wasn't for Larkin. When at one time when he died, he owned like 2/3 of all the private real estate in California. Larkin was from Boston, and he wrote his friends there and said, hey, and he was a merchant. He wanted to make a lot of money. That's why he came here. He said, there's all these cattle out here, and there's there's tons of supply. Why don't you come out? Because Boston was a big leather center for shoes and tallow and candles and soap and everything. All that supply, raw materials out here to sail around the Horn, and he started that. If you read Richard Henry Dana's book about coming around the Horn and being on a ship and being in Monterey and the coastal cities, he was on shore for a year cleaning hides. Because the thing they got out of here were hides. You know how many hides these shipping boats would take in the 1830s? 40,000 hides. So it was just a huge, massive industry, all done by hand. And it ended up being what was the regional economy of the area, the agriculture of the Salinas Valley, the livestock, and the Port of Monterey. And the Custom House is historical property number one. So why do I tell you all this? Because all of this interest in in government created here with the Constitution, it was never the state government, it was the government of Spain and Mexico. And the governors lived here for those countries. But when we created a state, we decided people that came here for the Constitutional Convention were so appalled with lack of hotels and places to stay. They had to sleep in the stables on the pre-CDO that they said, don't ever come back to Monterey. So we didn't know capital. And I already knew how we sell hotel rooms. But all of that, all the politics, in the Constitution of the state, those people at the Constitutional Convention were a very progressive group of people. It was the first state constitution that allowed women to inherit property, and they borrowed that from Spanish law, not from Anglo law. A lot of firsts in our state constitution. 10 years later, the rednecks took over the state and politics, and made anybody from any countries, particularly Asians and Mexicans, unwanted. So the point is that the birth of this great nation, this state, and this report that I got done in the 1990s, this push was to study. Nobody had done this. They said, let's just study the coast as an economic value. We know the value of Hollywood. We know the value of Silicon Valley, which was starting at that time. We know the centers of economic excellence all over the state in different parts, different regions. There's different timber industry up north, farming industry in the San Joaquin Valley, Salinas Valley. We know all of those values, but we never look at the geography of the California coast as an economic engine. And so Governor Wilson, he was cutting budgets. He kept the money in the budget, and I left for Congress. But they produced this report, and it really showed that the California coastline was the most valuable economic region of the United States, the whole United States. When you add up all the values, all the shipping that goes on here, all of the fishing industry, all of the marine research, all of the tourism, everything that makes up the coastline. And frankly, we had the best land use management act, which I got very involved in getting created, which was going to be celebrating its anniversary because it was adopted by the voters in '72. I don't know how many years ago that was, but we're in 2 years, so it's going to be another, 60 years or something. Anyway, that coastal act is the strongest land use management plan in the world for coastal zoning. And it's there, again, because of politics. It's voluntary. It's not, it's not top down. That was done by initiative. The legislature didn't have the guts to pass the coastal act. So it took a lot of environmental leaders and their money, private money, put it on the ballot, and we worked hard at the local level to get it passed. And that began sort of sensitizing California as to, wow, we have a lot here on the coastline, and yes, it's got to be managed properly, or it'll all become like in Malibu. I mean, that was sort of Malibu didn't have any access to the coast. My father was in the state legislature, and first thing he did was get Highway 1, which was in the state master plan for freeways. Can you imagine trying to build a freeway down Big Sur Highway? He got that out of the master plan and then worked hard to get a first land use plan for Big Sur. So all of this, everything we do is politics. And if we're going to fix things that are broken out there, like whale strikes, we can work that out. We know how to manage things once we understand the problem. We have this problem with too many people at the same time on the Big Sur Highway, and we have no toilets. And yesterday I drove up, and there's people on the side of the road just pooping, and you're like, oh, we got to be able to fix this. I say if we can manage crowds for Super Bowls, we can manage highways in Big Sur. It's just a matter of knowing the things. So, but that's all politics. And the politics isn't me, the elected official, is you that put me in that place. Yesterday somebody said, oh, thank you for your service. I said, thank you for giving me a job. It is a job. But this sanctuary, what happened, I was on the Board of Supervisors in the 1970s, and from 75 to 1980, and then I ran for the Assembly. And his friend Jim Rhoda I was talking about lived in Carmel, and I'd been working for the Assembly. At the time, I got appointed by Jerry Brown to the board. And Jim was up there, and we were commuting together. And then Jim took a leave of absence from the State Assembly Office of Research to go back and work for NOAA in Washington, D.C., in the Marine Fisheries Department. And I'm on the board, and I get a call, the clerk comes in and says, there's somebody from Washington, D.C. wants to talk to you. So I left the chair, and I went in and I took the call, and it's Jim Rope. He says, I'm telling you, all shit's going to break loose in a minute on the California coastline because Cecil Andrews, Secretary of Interior, is about to announce lease sale 53. I said, what the hell's that? He says, those are sales of tracts of land. The federal government owns all the ocean, and they divide it up into real estate tracts with numbers. And they do for what they call for nominations. If we're interested in leasing this real estate, are you interested in bidding on it? And you send this out to the oil companies. And I said, well, that's nuts. There's no oil in Northern California. It's all in Southern California. He said, no, there's oil in Northern California also. So I held probably my first press conference announcing that the federal government was going to do this lease sale 53 off the Monterey coast, off the Central California coast. Dan Hafley was working for Senator Mello. And what we did is we really began a grassroots effort. You just can't do this. So fortunately, we had Jerry Barton who built the Carmel Valley Ranch, was a developer of that. He was very big in Democratic politics, and he invited Cecil Andrews from Idaho to come out here and in his house. And I remember that evening because they had Alan Cranston, our senator, and Cecil Andrews, and Leon Banana, myself, and Henry Mello, and everybody else in politics was all at the house that night. And his special guest was Arthur Ashe, the great tennis player. So we just told Cecil Landry, she can't leave. Now, this is during the oil crisis. I mean, it was as it is today, but even hotter those days, because lines to get in the gas stations and they were starting to, you only could get gas on odds and even days, depending on the last number of your license plate, or first, whatever, how they managed that. But anyway, people were just screaming. In Iowa and Midwest, farmers were saying, drill, baby, drill. And so the pressure was on the Carter administration to open up oil drilling all over, including Northern California. Well, we really did a job at grassroots. We organized people immediately. We started the dialogue. I mean, frankly, it was the first time we really thought about this bay and in a collective of who has interest in it. And we got the people who own the restaurants here on the wharf and along the Cannery Road saying, you know, if this oil leak starts spreading oil on these, you think people are going to want to eat fish that come out of it or want to stay here in these hotels? And we got the Salinas farmers saying, you know, if that air quality changes, your microclimate changes, you're not going to grow artichokes. And all of a sudden, people began realizing that there was a causal connection between their income and this bay. And then maybe we ought to come together. And frankly, it was just amazing. There were no partisan grifts. I had a fundraiser by the retired president of Shell Oil who lived in Pebble Beach. And it was Republicans for Farr that McCloskey had organized. And I was out of sorts in there. And he told me, he told me, and he said, you know, I'm retired president of an oil company. He says, don't drill off this coast. His house was looking out off the bay. He didn't want to see oil down there. Fortunately, I mean, and what we did, and finally, I mean, Leon, it was interesting because Leon was in Congress, and we got him to at least put a moratorium, which you have to do in the budget bill, on the appropriations bill. It was the committee that I sat on when I was in Congress. And what you can't legislate on an appropriations bill. You can't say there will be no oil drilling, but you can stop them from spending money. So even though you have an authorization in the law, and even though it's mandated that the Mineral Management Agency has to go out and do due diligence about managing those tracts of land that may have mineral resources that we may want to sell, at least to commercial suppliers, whether it's, you know, timber in the forests or whether it's mining opportunities in the ocean floor, oil or gas, or whatever it is. They have a management responsibility. So what you do is you say, regardless of that being a law, this year, they can't spend any money doing it. You stop their ability to carry out the law. And that's what we did for the sanctuary. And that's what I did to try to get the federal government, the DEA, from stopping to bust people in California for using marijuana. Marijuana was legal in California. It was just illegal at the federal level, still is to this day. But we were able to put in the law and get it adopted that the DEA couldn't bust anybody in states that had legalized marijuana for medical purposes or other purposes. And the Congress just keeps passing that. They can't pass, I don't know, they don't have the votes to change the law, but they have the votes to at least stop the DEA from doing it. So that's a tool in the toolbox that you can use. And that's what we used in the years between 1978 and 1992 when Leon, and the first reaction to the bill, frankly, the opposition to the idea of a marine sanctuary came from the Italian Portuguese fishermen here. You know why? The word sanctuary. I remember when coming into my office, excuse my accent, but it was like, I wasn't in Congress, it was in, I was in the super, he says, you know, supervisor. He says, we are fishermen. We go out there to catch a fish. We don't go out there to pray. We don't want to go out there to pray. We don't want no sanctuary out in the ocean. We do that in church. And so, you know, they use that Italian influence on Leon to make at least say, hey, wait a minute, I got some political opposition. So we had to educate people as to the fact that the marine sanctuary was really about a management tool, not a religious tool. And it was fun. I mean, I had fun with that. Leon finally got a bill. I think what happened is that under the Carter administration, our grassroots effort here got Cecil Andrews to withdraw lease sale 53. So we thought we were okay. We're off. They're not going to do this. Well, then Reagan got elected in 1980. 80. And he appointed James Lee Watt to be Secretary of Interior. Watt was the first drill baby drill everywhere. He was just anti-environment. He was head of the Department of Interior. I mean, it's worse than anything we ever saw under Trump or anybody. He was scary. And that's when Leon and we all said, we're not going to be able to do this because the pressure on Congress was shaky. Leon did a marvelous job of getting that prevention language in there, the no spend the money prevention. But we finally decided we need a substantive bill to create a marine sanctuary. We knew that was in the toolbox of the federal government as an alternative to drilling. And since Congress was writing the bill, they could write what the sanctuary wanted to be, or what. And so this is, I think, the only sanctuary that has in statutory law that when you create the sanctuary, there will be no oil drilling inside the sanctuary. That's in federal law. And the only way that could be changed is by Congress changing the law. And it could under, these new right-wingers who want to go back to drill, baby, drill. But I think at least we got more protection than any other sanctuary has. So in passing that bill, and the interesting thing in politics was the Congress just authorizes the generic. There'll be a Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. NOAA, you go out to California, you hold all these public meetings on the record, and then you decide what size or the boundaries of this after hearing from Columbia. So there were 3 proposals. There was a small proposal. The oil that they were interested was in is off Año Nuevo. In fact, I didn't know this, but there's old oil wells in the Santa Cruz Mountains up by Honda. So that oil's been there a long time. And the first proposal excluded the area where oil was off Año Nuevo. The second one included it, but not all of it. And the third one is the map that Lisa showed you, which was the big one. And we named the big one we want the whole enchilada. That's what we called it. Well, this was politics, because you now had, who was president then? Was that Reagan?
Bush.
That was Bush.
It was first Bush. And so Pete Wilson was the senator from California who had understood the value of the coastal life and understood the value of the coast, because this report that I gotten authorized to do. So he went to Bush and he said, you know what? It's election year. You got a tough election out there in California. Clinton's doing very well. If you want to capture the environmental vote, support the big one. And he said, you know what? He told Bush, he said, the oil companies will be pissed off, but you know what? There's not that much oil out there, and it's expensive oil to drill. So it's not one of their passions that they got to have this oil no matter what the circumstances are. And the gain is that you'll get this vote from California. So that just shocked us all, because Bush endorsed that. What comes around goes around. His son, I'm in Congress, his son's president, and now we have the new cheer of drill, baby, drill for oil. And we let the White House know in all uncertain terms, if you continue on that for the California coastline. So it's still very delicate for a lot of these other sanctuaries, but we're pretty well protected. But we're only protected as long as the politic protects us, and the politic is you.
There you go.